The rain fell in silver streaks across the cafe window, each droplet carrying a reflection of the lonely city lights. Inside, tucked into a dim corner, sat a young woman in a second-hand floral dress that had long lost its color. Her fingers trembled slightly as she smoothed the wrinkles out of her skirt, trying to appear calm. Her name was Elena, and she was about to go on a blind date with only $5 to her name. The waiter passed by, and she smiled nervously, ordering the cheapest thing on the menu. A cup of coffee she planned to sip slowly, making it last the whole evening. She checked her phone again. 7:12 p.m. Her date was late. A part of her prayed he wouldn't show up. She wasn't sure she could handle another round of polite rejection disguised as pity. Outside the cafe window, the world moved fast, umbrellas rushing by, headlights blurring in motion. But Elena sat still, like a forgotten soul caught between survival and hope. She tried to remind herself why she came, because even poor people deserve love, she thought with a broken smile. At the next table, a man watched her quietly. His suit was expensive, his demeanor calm. Ethan Cross, a CEO known in business circles for his sharp instincts and colder heart, was having dinner with his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. He noticed the girl sitting alone, her eyes flicking between the door and her untouched cup. Something about her posture, fragile yet proud, made him pause. "Daddy," Lily whispered, tugging his sleeve. "Why does that lady look sad?" Ethan turned his gaze back toward Elena. "Maybe she's waiting for someone," he said softly. But as he spoke, his attention lingered longer than he expected. Minutes stretched into an hour. The blind date never came. Elena's phone stayed silent. She stared at it for a moment, then quietly placed it face down on the table. The hope drained from her eyes, leaving behind a dull ache she had become too familiar with. She reached into her bag, counting the crumpled bills. $5 and a few coins. That was all. She had spent her last bit of courage coming here. Trying to hide her embarrassment, she stood up to leave, clutching her old jacket close as if it could protect her from the weight of disappointment. As she stepped outside, the wind caught her hair and the world felt too big again. She walked toward the nearest bus stop, her heels clicking on wet pavement, her reflection distorted in puddles. At the bus stop, she sat alone under the flickering streetlight. The city roared in the distance. She thought about how far she'd fallen, from once having dreams of college and a home, to now counting coins for bus fare. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw a small figure. A little girl standing too close to the curb, staring at something across the street. Cars whooshed by, horns blaring. The child took a hesitant step forward. "Hey, wait!" Elena shouted, instinct taking over as she leaped from the bench. The girl stumbled just as a car sped by, its tires slicing through a puddle. In one desperate motion, Elena grabbed the girl's arm and pulled her back with all her strength. They both fell to the ground, splashing water everywhere. The car's horn blared angrily as it disappeared into the night. For a moment, everything was still. The rain, the noise, even Elena's heart. She looked down at the trembling child in her arms. The girl's wide, tearful eyes met hers, and in that instant, Elena realized she'd just saved her life. The child clung to her tightly, whispering through shaky breaths, "Please, don't let them take me back." Elena froze, the rain dripping from her eyelashes. "Take you back? To who?" she asked softly. The girl looked up, her voice breaking. "The people who said they were my new family. They hurt me." Elena's chest tightened as she pulled the child closer, shielding her from the cold. In that dark, rain-soaked night, two souls, one lost, one broken, had just collided by fate, and neither of them knew. Someone else was watching. From across the street, Ethan stood frozen under an umbrella, his heart pounding at what he had just witnessed. The rain had softened to a mist, wrapping the street in a hazy glow. Elena held the little girl close beneath the flickering bus stop light, her heart still racing from the near accident. The child's small frame trembled against her chest, her wet hair sticking to her cheeks. "Hey, it's okay," Elena whispered, brushing the strands away. "You're safe now, sweetheart." The girl didn't answer at first. Her eyes darted up and down the empty street, as if she expected someone to come running after her. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "They said they'd lock me outside again if I told anyone." Elena blinked. "Who did?" "The foster people," the child mumbled, hugging herself. "I ran away while they were fighting." Elena felt a chill deeper than the rain. She looked around. No adults searching, no cars slowing down. Just this little girl alone in the night, carrying a fear too heavy for her age. "What's your name?" Elena asked gently. "Lily," she said. Elena froze at the name. It was the same name the businessman's daughter had called out earlier at the café, but she didn't have time to connect the dots now. All that mattered was that the girl was scared and alone. "Lily," Elena repeated softly. "You're brave for coming this far, but we can't stay here, okay? You'll get sick." Lily looked up, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Can you be my mommy instead?" The words hit Elena like a thunderclap. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. She wanted to say yes, to scoop the child into her arms and promise her safety, warmth, and love. But the truth was a cruel one. Elena had no home, no money, no food. She could barely keep herself alive. I can't, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't even have a place to live." Lily's face fell. "But you saved me." Elena's eyes burned as she swallowed the lump in her throat. "I did what anyone would have done," she said, though deep down she knew that wasn't true. Most people would have hesitated. Most people would have looked away. Behind them, a soft click echoed, a car door shutting. Elena turned and saw Ethan standing under his umbrella, watching quietly. He'd followed them without really knowing why, drawn by something he couldn't explain. His daughter, his real Lily, was safe at home with the babysitter. This child was someone else's story. And yet, something about the scene made his heart twist. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his tone careful, respectful. Elena's instinct flared. Fear of judgment, of being accused. "We're fine," she said quickly, pulling the girl a little closer. Ethan studied her, noting the soaked clothes, the dirt on her shoes, the look of both exhaustion and fierce protectiveness in her eyes. "You pulled her out of the road," he said quietly. "That was brave." Elena didn't answer. Compliments didn't fill stomachs or fix lives. Lily tugged her sleeve. "He's nice," she whispered. Ethan crouched down to the girl's level, lowering his umbrella to shield them both. "You're very lucky, you know that? She saved you." Lily nodded, then pointed to Elena. "She's my mommy now." Ethan looked up, startled. Elena's eyes widened in panic. "She's just confused," she said quickly. "She doesn't have anyone right now." "I was just trying to help." Ethan hesitated. He could sense the truth in her voice, a woman trying to help when she herself needed saving. "Let me call someone," he offered. "A shelter, maybe. You both shouldn't be out here." But Elena shook her head fiercely. "No police, no system. They'll just take her back to the same place." Her desperation was raw and real. Ethan felt something shift in him, a rare crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. Before he could speak again, a voice echoed from down the street. "There, that's her. The runaway." Two adults hurried toward them, waving and shouting. The girl screamed, clinging to Elena's waist. Ethan looked between them. The terrified child, the trembling woman, and the strangers running closer. The rain fell harder again, blurring the lines between right and wrong. Elena's grip tightened around the girl. "Please," she whispered to Ethan, eyes wide with fear. "Don't let them take her." And in that suspended heartbeat, Ethan Cross, CEO, father, stranger, had to make a choice. The approaching voices grew louder, slicing through the rain like sirens in the dark. Two figures, a man and woman, rushed toward them, their expressions a mix of frustration and relief. The woman's voice was sharp, accusing. "That's her! She ran from our home this afternoon. We've been looking everywhere." Lily shrank behind Elena, clutching the hem of her soaked dress. "No," she cried. "Don't make me go back, please." Elena's heart pounded as she shielded the girl instinctively. "She's terrified," she said, her tone trembling but firm. "Maybe there's a reason she ran." The man, tall and scowling, jabbed a finger in her direction. And who are you to question that? Some stranger off the street? The words cut deeper than he knew. Elena's cheeks flushed with shame. She was a stranger. Worse, she was poor, alone, invisible. But tonight, she couldn't let that define her. She straightened her shoulders and held the child tighter. "She almost died in traffic because of you," she snapped. "You should be thanking me, not yelling." Ethan stepped forward then, his presence commanding. The couple froze as his deep, measured voice broke the tension. "She's right," he said, his tone calm but authoritative. "That child could have been killed. Maybe we should all slow down and let her explain before making threats." The foster couple exchanged uneasy glances. Something about the man's confidence, his tailored suit, the weight of his words, made them hesitate. Elena turned to Ethan, confused but grateful. For a brief second, their eyes met, his steady and composed, hers wide and vulnerable. In that look, something unspoken passed between them. Trust born not of familiarity, but of shared instinct. Lily buried her face against Elena's side, sobbing. "Please don't let them take me," she whispered. The woman huffed. "We have papers. She's legally in our care. Then why is she begging not to go back?" Ethan countered quietly. "Why does she look like she hasn't eaten in days?" The man's jaw tightened. "That's none of your business." "Actually," Ethan said, stepping closer, "it is. You're on public property, and this child's safety is everyone's business. Until proper authorities handle it." Elena's stomach dropped at the word, authorities. She had dealt with enough social workers to know that the system didn't always protect the weak. It often buried them in bureaucracy. "Please don't call anyone," she whispered. "They'll just separate us." Ethan looked at her carefully. "You just met her," he said softly. "Why are you risking so much for a stranger's child?" Elena hesitated. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "Because I know what it feels like to be unwanted." Silence fell. The rain seemed to hush itself in respect. Ethan's expression softened, his usual coolness melting away. Behind the polished exterior of a CEO, something in him stirred. A memory, perhaps, of his own past loneliness after losing his wife, of the nights when his daughter cried for a mother she barely remembered. The foster couple, impatient now, took a step forward. "We'll handle this," the man snapped. "Move aside." Ethan raised a hand. "You'll wait," he said sternly. He turned to Elena. "Let's go inside somewhere safe. I'll call someone I trust." Elena hesitated, torn between fear and hope. She didn't know this man, why he cared, what he wanted, but the kindness in his eyes was real. "You don't have to get involved," she murmured. "Maybe not," Ethan said, glancing at the trembling child, "but I'm already involved." He motioned toward his car parked nearby. The foster couple protested, but Ethan's quiet authority ended the argument before it began. "If your story's true, you'll have nothing to fear when we get things straightened out," he said evenly. Inside the warm car, Lily finally relaxed a little, clutching a soft blanket Ethan had handed her. Elena sat stiffly in the passenger seat, the heat from the vents fogging the windows. She looked down at her shaking hands, realizing how surreal it all was. A blind date that never happened had somehow turned into a rescue. Ethan glanced at her between traffic lights. "You did the right thing," he said. Elena gave a bitter laugh. "The right thing doesn't feed you, or keep you dry." He studied her profile in the glow of the streetlights, her tired eyes, her patched coat, the quiet strength she didn't even realize she had. "Maybe not," he said gently, "but it says a lot about who you are." She turned toward him, skeptical. "And who do you think I am?" He smiled faintly. "Someone braver than most people I know." Elena looked away, her heart tightening at the sincerity in his tone. For the first time in a long while, someone saw her. Not the dirt on her shoes, not the poverty in her eyes, but the person underneath. Still, she couldn't shake the fear. "What happens now?" she whispered. Ethan's gaze flicked to the rearview mirror where Lily had finally fallen asleep. "Now," he said quietly, "we find out what really happened to that little girl." But neither of them knew that the truth waiting ahead would test every ounce of their courage and bind their fates forever. The drive through the rain felt endless. Streetlights shimmered through the windshield like streaks of melted gold, each flash illuminating Elena's pale, anxious face. She sat silently, watching the sleeping child in the back seat. Lily's small hands were clutching the blanket tightly, as if afraid it might be taken away. Ethan glanced at her again, sensing the storm of thoughts behind those tired eyes. "There's a place I know," he said finally. "A small private shelter, quiet, safe, and off the record. I donate to them sometimes. They can give you both a place to rest for the night." Elena's first instinct was to refuse. "You don't even know me," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Why would you help?" He gave a faint, almost sad smile. "Because I've needed help before, too." The words startled her. She studied his reflection in the rain-streaked window. Ethan looked like a man who had everything: wealth, power, control, yet his tone carried a kind of loneliness she recognized. She didn't know yet that his success had been built on loss, that the death of his wife 5 years earlier had left him raising Lily alone, his heart sealed behind routines and business deals. When they finally arrived at the shelter, a renovated townhouse tucked behind a quiet street, Elena felt the weight of exhaustion pressing on her shoulders. The warm glow from the porch light seemed almost unreal. A kind-faced woman opened the door. "Ethan," she greeted warmly. "It's been a while." "Evening, Maria," he said. "This young woman needs a safe place for tonight, and there's a child who might need protection from a dangerous home situation." Maria's eyes softened as she took in the scene: Elena's soaked clothes, Lily's tear-stained face. "Come in, both of you," she said. "Let's get you warm." Inside, the air smelled of soup and lavender soap. Elena's hands shook as she held a cup of tea Maria offered her. For the first time in months, she was sitting in a place that felt safe. The realization hit her hard, so hard her eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. Ethan noticed. "When was the last time you ate?" he asked gently. Elena gave a small, embarrassed laugh. 2 days ago," she murmured. "Unless you count a piece of bread someone dropped." Something twisted in Ethan's chest. He was used to numbers and deals, not hunger and hopelessness. But seeing her now, a woman who risked her life for a child despite having nothing, it made him question everything he thought he knew about strength. As Maria led Lily to a small room to change into dry clothes, Ethan turned to Elena. "You should stay here tonight," he said. "Both of you. I'll make sure she's safe until we sort this out." Elena hesitated. "And then what? The system takes her back?" "Not if we can prove she's been abused," Ethan said. "I'll talk to a friend of mine, a social worker I trust." Her eyes widened. "You'd do that?" He nodded. Of course, something in her broke then, not from sadness but relief. She hadn't realized how long it had been since someone offered help without asking for something in return. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Thank you. I don't even know your name." "Ethan Cross," he said quietly, extending his hand. Her eyes widened again. "Wait, you're that Ethan Cross?" "The CEO." He gave a modest shrug. "Titles don't matter much tonight, do they?" Elena stared at him, unsure how to respond. The man who had probably dined in penthouses and boardrooms was now sitting beside her in a small shelter, worrying about a homeless woman and a runaway child. It didn't make sense, and yet it felt right. Just then, Maria returned, her expression troubled. "Ethan," she said softly, "you should see this." They followed her into the small room where Lily now sat on the bed in clean pajamas. Maria handed Ethan a file she had pulled from the shelter's emergency intake database. "The foster family reported her missing this afternoon," she explained. "But there's more. You need to read the attached notes." Ethan scanned the documents, his jaw tightening. The report listed multiple complaints: bruises, neglect, suspected abuse, but each had been closed without follow-up. Elena's heart sank. "So they knew," she whispered. "And they did nothing?" Ethan closed the file, anger flickering behind his calm eyes. "Not anymore," he said firmly. "Tomorrow morning, we make sure this is exposed." Lily looked up from the bed, her voice small. "Will I have to go back?" Elena knelt beside her, taking her tiny hand. "No, sweetheart," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Not if I can help it," Lily's lip quivered. "Can I stay with you then? You're nice, and you smell like cookies." Elena laughed through her tears. "I'll try to bake some, if we ever have a kitchen." Ethan watched them. One broken woman, one lost child, and felt something awaken deep inside him. The boardrooms, the meetings, the endless chase for success, all of it suddenly seemed so small compared to this simple moment of compassion. But outside, unseen in the darkness, a car engine idled. The foster couple hadn't gone far. They were watching the shelter from across the street, fury burning in their eyes, and one of them picked up a phone. The night deepened into an uneasy silence. Inside the shelter, the storm had passed, but a different kind of tension lingered in the air, one that came not from thunder, but from fear of what dawn might bring. Ethan had stayed longer than he'd intended. He sat by the window in the small common room, his jacket draped over the back of a chair, watching the city lights blur through the glass. Across from him, Elena dozed lightly on the couch, her hand resting protectively on the armrest near Lily, who was fast asleep beside her. The sight struck something inside him, a memory of his own daughter sleeping in his late wife's arms years ago, before illness took her away. Back then, he'd promised himself never to get close to anyone again. Love, he had decided, was too dangerous. But tonight, seeing Elena and Lily, something in that promise began to unravel. He reached for his phone to check the time, nearly 1 a.m., when it buzzed unexpectedly. A message flashed across the screen from an unknown number. "We know you have her. That kid belongs to us. Stay out of it, Mr. Cross." Ethan's brow furrowed. He stood, stepping quietly into the hallway, his business instincts kicking in. Whoever sent that text knew his name, knew where he was. This wasn't just a foster home dispute, it was something darker. Maria appeared from the kitchen, concern written on her face. "Everything okay?" He showed her the message. Her expression hardened. "Those people, they've been reported before. We've seen this kind of intimidation. They'll do anything to keep their records clean." Ethan clenched his jaw. Then they picked the wrong man to threaten. Meanwhile, Elena stirred awake, blinking sleep from her eyes. She saw Ethan standing near the window, his phone still in hand, his shoulders tense. "What happened?" she asked, sitting up quickly. He didn't want to alarm her, but lying felt wrong. Someone texted, "Probably the Foster family, but don't worry, I won't let anything happen to either of you." Elena's stomach dropped. "They know you're here?" "Apparently," he said. "But I have contacts who can make sure this doesn't end quietly." She rose to her feet, panic edging her voice. "You don't understand how the system works. People like me, like her, we disappear. Nobody listens to us." Ethan looked at her, his eyes steady. "Then they'll listen to me." For a moment, their gazes locked, his filled with quiet determination, hers trembling between disbelief and hope. She wanted to trust him, but her past whispered warnings. No one helps without wanting something back. As if sensing her doubt, Ethan softened his tone. "I'm not doing this out of charity, Elena. I'm doing it because it's right." She swallowed hard, emotion thick in her throat. "I've never met someone who said that and actually meant it." He took a slow breath. "Then maybe it's time you did." Before she could reply, the sound of screeching tires outside shattered the fragile calm. Headlights flashed through the curtains. Voices shouted from the street, angry, impatient. Maria rushed in, her face pale. "They're back," she whispered. "The couple. They're demanding to see the child." Elena's pulse spiked. Lily stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly. Ethan's expression turned sharp, calculating. "Keep the doors locked," he said. "Call the police. Tell them we have a child at risk of abduction." Maria nodded and hurried away. Ethan moved to the window, parting the curtain just enough to see 2 figures pacing near a dark van. He could hear their muffled voices. "They think they can hide her here," the man growled. "They'll regret this." Elena's hands trembled. "They're not going to stop," she whispered. Ethan turned to her, his voice low and steady. "You trust me? I want to," she said. Then take Lily and go upstairs. There's a back stairwell that leads to the office. Stay there until I call for you. What about you?" He gave a faint smile, the kind that carried both courage and danger. "I've handled worse boardroom battles than this." She hesitated, then nodded, scooping Lily gently into her arms. As she disappeared up the stairs, Ethan rolled up his sleeves and stepped into the dimly lit entryway, every bit of his CEO poise replaced with quiet steel. When the pounding started at the door, he was ready. "Open up," the man shouted. "We have legal custody." Ethan opened the door just a crack, his voice calm but unyielding. "You'll wait for the authorities. If you set foot on this property again, I'll make sure your entire record goes public." The man sneered. "You think your money scares us?" Ethan's eyes narrowed. "No, but the truth will." They glared at each other, rain dripping from their coats. Finally, the couple retreated to their van, muttering threats as they drove off. But the moment the taillights disappeared, Ethan exhaled, realizing just how close that had been. He climbed the stairs to check on Elena and Lily. They were huddled together in the office, the child asleep once more, Elena's eyes wide and searching. "Are they gone?" she whispered. "For now," he said softly. "But this isn't over." As dawn began to creep over the city, Ethan looked out the window, already planning his next move. Tomorrow, the system would know their names, and this time, it would listen. But neither he nor Elena knew that by exposing the truth, they were about to expose something else, something that would tie their lives together forever. The first light of morning spilled through the thin curtains, painting the shelter walls with shades of gold and gray. Elena sat on the edge of the small cot, holding Lily close. The child's head rested against her chest, her breathing slow and even. She had finally stopped trembling, but Elena couldn't rest. Her thoughts were racing, images of the night before flashing behind her eyes like scenes from a nightmare. The shouting, the headlights, the threat in those strangers' eyes. She felt the old panic creeping back, the same suffocating fear she'd known when she'd lost everything. Her job, her home, her dignity. Only this time, she wasn't just fighting for herself. The door creaked softly. Ethan stepped in, now dressed in a fresh suit, though his face carried the fatigue of a man who hadn't slept. "Good morning," he said gently. "How's she doing?" Elena looked down at Lily. "Better," she whispered. "She hasn't let go of me since last night." Ethan smiled faintly. "I can't blame her." He sat down in the chair across from them, his tone calm but purposeful. "I made some calls this morning. The couple's foster license has been temporarily suspended pending investigation." Elena's eyes widened. "You did that already?" He nodded. "I have friends in the department who move fast when there's a child's safety at stake. They're sending someone trustworthy here to talk to you both." Tears welled up in her eyes before she could stop them. "You didn't have to do all this," she whispered. "You don't even know me." Ethan met her gaze steadily. "Maybe not, but I know what kind of person you are. Most people would have walked away. You didn't." His words landed deep in her chest, hitting a place that had long been hollow. For years, people had seen her as a burden, a failure, a ghost of who she used to be. But now, someone saw her worth, and it terrified her as much as it comforted her. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "Say you'll trust me," he replied softly. "Just for today." Before she could answer, there was a knock on the door. Maria stepped in, followed by a woman in her late 30s with kind eyes and a badge clipped to her jacket. "Elena, this is Clara," Maria said. "She's with Family Protective Services, the one Ethan called." Clara smiled warmly and knelt near Lily. "Hey, sweetheart," she said gently. "I heard you've been very brave." Lily nodded shyly but kept one hand clinging to Elena's sleeve. Clara looked up at Elena. "Can I ask you a few questions? Just to make sure we can protect her the right way." Elena hesitated but nodded. Over the next half hour, she answered everything. How she'd found Lily, what the girl had said about her foster parents, how Ethan had helped them get to safety. As she spoke, Clara's expression shifted from polite interest to quiet horror. "This matches 2 prior reports," Clara said finally, closing her notebook. but no one ever followed up. You did the right thing, Elena. You might have saved this girl's life. Elena exhaled shakily, relief and disbelief crashing together inside her. But Clara wasn't done. There's more, she added softly. Once we finish the paperwork, we'll need a temporary guardian for Lily until her placement is reviewed. Since she trusts you. Elena froze. Me? But I don't have a home. I don't even have a job right now. Ethan leaned forward. What if that changed? She turned to him, confused. What do you mean? He hesitated for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I run a non-profit division through my company, part of our outreach program. We hire people who need a fresh start. You're strong, compassionate, and brave. Exactly the kind of person we need. If you'll take it, you'd have steady work and a place to stay. Elena blinked, stunned. You'd really do that for me? Ethan gave a faint smile. Let's just say, I believe in second chances. The room fell quiet except for the soft hum of morning traffic outside. Elena looked down at Lily, who was now watching her with sleepy, hopeful eyes. Can we stay together? The girl asked, her voice small and trembling. Elena's heart broke open. I don't know, baby, she whispered. I'll do everything I can, Clara smiled gently. We'll make it happen, she said. You have my word. For a long moment, the three adults exchanged glances that carried both relief and promise. Something fragile but real had begun to form, a thread connecting their lives in ways none of them had expected. But before peace could settle, Ethan's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a threat, it was a call from his office. He stepped outside to answer, his tone low and clipped. When he returned, his face was pale. What's wrong? Elena asked immediately. He hesitated. Someone broke into my corporate server last night, he said quietly. Confidential files, including our charity records, were stolen. Maria frowned. Do you think it's related to this? Ethan nodded grimly. It's too much of a coincidence. Elena's stomach turned cold. You mean, they're trying to destroy you for helping us? He looked at her, his jaw tight. Looks like we've both become targets. The room fell silent, the air heavy with dread. And though the sun now poured through the window, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that the storm wasn't over. It was only changing shape. The morning had grown warmer, the first fragile rays of sunlight spilling through the shelter windows. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, holding Lily's small hand in hers. The child's eyes were bright, filled with trust, and for the first time in days, the tremor of fear had eased from her shoulders. But outside, the city was awakening to a storm that wasn't weather. Ethan had spent the early hours coordinating with the authorities, lawyers, and his trusted security team. The stolen files and threats from the foster couple were not idle. They were a last, desperate attempt to intimidate anyone who dared interfere. Elena, still exhausted from the previous night's chaos, turned to Ethan. I don't understand, she said softly. How can you do all this? You barely know me. Ethan leaned against the wall, his gaze distant but resolute. It's not about knowing you. It's about knowing right from wrong. And tonight, we fix what's been broken. Minutes later, a knock sounded at the door. Clara, from Family Protective Services, entered with a calm authority that immediately settled the room. We're ready, she said. We've arranged a temporary guardianship for Lily, and we can place her with you, if you accept. We'll handle the rest of the foster investigation from here. Elena's throat tightened. Me? But I have nothing. No home, no money. I can barely. Ethan interrupted gently. You're not alone anymore. You have resources, a safe place, and people who believe in you. That's enough to start. Elena looked down at Lily, whose small hand clutched her sleeve tightly. The little girl's wide eyes pleaded with her to say yes, and in that moment, Elena realized something she had forgotten long ago. Courage doesn't mean having everything. It means stepping forward when everything is uncertain. I'll do it, she whispered, tears spilling freely. I'll take care of her. I promise, Clara nodded, her face softening. Then it's official. Lily will stay with you under temporary guardianship until her case is fully reviewed. Lily squealed softly and wrapped her arms around Elena. "Thank you, Mommy," she whispered. Elena held her close, feeling the warmth of the moment seep into every corner of her exhausted heart. "Thank you for trusting me," she replied, her voice trembling. Ethan watched them from across the room, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He felt the familiar pang of emotion, a mixture of relief, admiration, and awe. He had seen Elena risk everything to save a child she barely knew. That act of bravery had created a bond stronger than money, status, or fear. And now, he realized, it had changed his own life too. As the day progressed, legal matters moved forward, ensuring that Lily would remain in safe hands and that the foster couple's abuse would be investigated thoroughly. Elena, for the first time, felt a flicker of hope. Not the fleeting kind, but one that could grow, steady and true. Later, Ethan escorted them to a small apartment provided by his charity program. It was modest, but clean, with warm blankets and a small kitchen where Elena could finally cook meals for Lily. Standing in the doorway, she took a deep breath, feeling a rare sense of home wash over her. "You did this," she said softly to Ethan. "All of it. You made this possible." He shook his head gently. "You did it, Elena. You risked your safety to protect someone weaker than you. I just made sure no one stopped you." She looked down at Lily, who was exploring the new space with cautious excitement. And in that moment, Elena understood something essential. Heroism wasn't about being fearless. It was about acting despite fear, about holding someone else's life gently in your hands and refusing to let go. Ethan watched the scene quietly, a subtle warmth spreading through him. In one night, lives had intertwined in ways none of them could have predicted. A poor woman with nothing, a terrified little girl, and a man who thought he could only save through power and money. Together, they had found something far more valuable: trust, hope, and the courage to begin again. As night fell over the city once more, Elena tucked Lily into bed. She kissed her forehead and whispered, "We're going to be okay, I promise." And in that quiet, tender moment, Elena realized she had been saved too, not by wealth, by chance, or by someone else's power, but by her own bravery, her compassion, and the unbreakable bond that had formed in the storm. Outside, Ethan paused for a moment, looking up at the stars. He knew life would continue to challenge them, but he also knew that some connections, born from courage and kindness, were unshakable. And for the first time in years, all three of them, Elena, Lily, and Ethan, felt the warm certainty of hope, the kind that could survive any storm.